Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good morning, if you're on my side of the world. Thank you so much for joining, and apologies, we are 1 minute late. Anyone who joined the last session will know that I like to keep a tight schedule with these things. So apologies for some slight technical difficulties there, but we're here. We have made it. So I'm also I've just noticed that I'm playing through my own ear. So I'm just going to close my LinkedIn feed. Otherwise that would have been very annoying. So I am Lorna Hegarty. I am the Senior Brand and Comms Manager for Squiz, and I'm really excited to be hosting this session again today. So this is the second in our series of Ask Me Anything sessions, and they're all based on the insights that have come out of our DX in 2024 Trends Report. So anyone who registered for this event or the previous event should have received a copy of that report. If you haven't, just comment report in the comment section below, and we will send a link to you. I'm talking a lot. I'd like to also welcome our two wonderful expert speakers today, Tom Kirkby, who's our President of Americas for Squiz, and Sam Goebel, who is joining us from Exentium, who's VP of Digital. Now, last time in our session, we talked about the fact that we've really got to stop just playing with tech and actually start piloting it with intent. What we're going to do today is take that conversation a little bit further, and we're going to talk about the fact that if you have already got to that point where you've got the dreaded Frankenstack, how can you tackle it? What can you do? And how can you move forward? So, Tom, I'd like to throw to you first. I'd love to just hear from you, hear it from your perspective. What do we actually mean when we talk about taming the Frankenstack?
Yeah, I love that question. It kind of invokes this image, right? Like you think of this, multi-armed monster with Salesforce over here and, databases everywhere and things like that. For me personally, when I see one, I know one. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of tools the modern marketer has at their fingertips today, right? And it's not to say that you should have just one platform and it should all be one vendor and everything just bought that way, monolithic. But what it is to say is, when the tools have a lot of overlap, when the tools require more work to get one tool to work with the other, when your vision holders, right, those marketers and digital leaders who are creating the digital experiences, when they're all sort of struggling to get the work done, that's when you're starting to get close to having that Frankenstack situation. And I think a lot of us probably will think about our own system and be like, oh yeah, this thing's stitched together from a whole bunch of places. It's a good time to start thinking about what to do about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And Sam, I'd love to hear from you before we kick off with the actual questions. What are you thinking, or how are you hoping we'll be able to help attendees today?
I think there's a couple of takeaways that I would love to get out there. And this comes from, when I'm talking to customers, when I'm at events and just talking to other marketers. I think there is still the perception out there that this is a massive task. This is a big, year-long or multi-year project. And in 2024, that is not the case anymore. Technology has become faster. Speed to value is all over the place. But the key to that is knowing what's going to make the most impact for you in the short term. So, I think if I'm going to leave anyone with anything, it's take a look at where you are today. Obviously, with our roles, where we're implementing new solutions, we're selling software, but we're also really about helping businesses do more with less budget, do more with existing headcount, and all of these modern systems. I think if you haven't looked at them recently, they're worth a look. You might be surprised at how reasonable the cost might be and how quick you might get massive value from just taking on, a pilot of some piece of that Frankenstack.
Awesome, thank you. And actually, it's probably worth us clarifying that we could be talking about any number of pieces of tech, right, that support a marketing team. So I think for the purpose of today's conversation, you guys are the experts in the field of digital experiences and DXPs, and we'll be looking at the type of capabilities that slot into those platforms. So just to be clear on the type of tech you'll be hearing about today, we'd be here for hours, frankly, if we were trying to talk about it all. And we don't have hours, sadly. we do just have 40 minutes. So we'll be powering through we've had lots of questions. We'll be powering through a few of them that we've kind of picked out to talk about today. But if you have any other questions as we go through, please just drop them in the chat, and we'll leave some time right at the end. I'll make sure we cut off at the end to give some time to come to those and see if we can answer them live as well. So let's jump into question 1. I think I quite like with these sessions to just address the elephant in the room up front, get it out there. And I think with this topic, what a lot of people might be slightly terrified about is, yeah, I've definitely got a Frankenstack. I definitely need to do something about it. Is my only option to re-platform? Because that sounds a bit terrifying. So Sam, I'll hand over to you. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, that ties into my earlier comments really well. So to answer the question, if I were to get, I have to re-platform, I would challenge how we think about re-platforming nowadays. So my answer to that, if I have to give a yes, no, is going to be no. I think the way that we should be looking at, the solutions that you have, the capabilities that you have with that Frankenstack, is to always look at things iteratively. I think this feels a bit like common sense, but it's hard to actually put into place if you are the person making those decisions or putting together the business case. But this idea of, delivering, time to value within a quarter of the year, instead of saying, okay, we're going to take on this massive, millions of dollars project, and oh, by the way, stakeholder, you'll see something in 6 to 9 months. When you don't operate that way, you're building that faith and that buy-in in terms of the value of what you're doing, number one. So, I think there's a few things that in terms of tactically managing that you would want to track. So first of all, just have kind of as an operational milestone as you're reviewing your technology, how are those licenses doing? Are you getting close to end of life? Make sure that you're understanding the cost of running that. So maybe you're on a system that you say, hey, my team knows this really well. We know it inside and out. This is great. But maybe it costs a lot to host. Maybe your developer support that you're managing internally is becoming unwieldy, right? There might be other ancillary benefits that aren't just about, hey, here's this capability that a new shiny piece of software could deliver. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to evaluate. And you can very easily, like we do this at Exentium, we have kind of a regular, metrics of, okay, this is what we look at. And we're looking at a few things. What's the thing that we need next? And what's the thing that's going to help us grow beyond that? And then we craft those milestones into our marketing goals to make sure that we're evaluating at those different points in time. So it's about balancing that spend with making sure that you have the tool set available to get you to that next business value. And I think I still have to say this now, but too often we see the, stopping at the capabilities of the software. Okay, we need to do this thing because this is best in breed, this is top quadrant in Gartner. And folks miss what's the value that you're going to have to prove out after you make that investment. Sometimes things fall off there, and making sure that your stakeholders are aligned with the expectations of what that's going to allow you to do to tie it to that bottom line is really mission critical.
I think that's some really good points. I don't know if I could jump in. Last time I checked, there's about 14,000 tracked apps that fit into the MarTech category right now. Chances are you've got more than one system in your business. Right. And when we say re-platform, immediately what comes to mind for me is wipe the slate clean and start completely over from scratch. That's not practical. No one would ever consider doing that. Right. If you need to change the tires on your car, you don't throw away the entire car. You just get a new tire, right, to fix that. But, the thing that you were saying right in there that caught my ear, Sam, was really how you need to reevaluate each of the pieces of the puzzle and decide, is it fit for purpose? Is it, driving the value that I need for this organization? And when you have a narrow focus, I think you can be, pretty cold-hearted about it, right? Just like pruning a tree, you can trim off the dead leaves.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of cutting myself off because I could go down a whole rabbit hole of conversations that I've heard organizations have where like we all tend to get in our own way, right? We tend to like overanalyze and but you know, we get scared to make a move. The exciting thing for me as a marketer with all of this composable software is that, you know, you can get to that fast fail so that at least you haven't spent, you know, a year on a project that then under delivers, right? So like, you know, as you're looking at these things, you know, again, it's critical to understand what that value is. And by the way, it's beyond those conversions on the front end, right? You have to consider the organization spend internally. And so on most of the projects that I've worked on in the past couple of years, almost of equal value to the, you know, to the improved conversion, to the improved performance on the front end of a website project, for example, is also on the ease of adoption and on what they empower your internal teams to do. So, you know, there's both of those things that tie into that business value. So don't forget about your operational risks and costs and how the right tech, as well as the right process around it, can really help to drive that value.
And I think you said one of those magical buzzwords. I was just gonna say, I think you said one of those magical buzzwords, composable, right? It's one of those things that gets tossed around our industry a lot today, and some platforms are doing it amazingly well. Like I'm a big fan of HubSpot. If you want to connect that to your email account to have it set up meetings for you, or send out email sequences, it does it like that. It's got a connector for everything you need. You don't have to go and spend like a 3-month dev cycle writing these integrations. But some of the platforms out there, some of the tools out there, it's a little less composable than others, right? Like it does still require that sort of stuff. And I think that's one of those keen sort of things you have to keep an eye on when taking a look at your stack. Is it, you know, this precious thing that if you put a fingerprint on it, it all falls apart and you have to go and write a whole bunch of new code again? Or is it something that is resilient, that you can plug and play in different tools, you know, to hit those results that you need when you need them?
Well, and on top of it, if you find yourself relying on a key person or a couple of people and their specific knowledge of how to support something, you've got a massive risk. So, you know, that's the other thing about like true composable that I like, and that I know our Accentium developers actually really like. It, you know, developing this stuff is becoming less complex, which is great news, right? It's sort of bad news for Accentium because it means the size of our development projects shrinks. However, it gets us ready to do the exciting stuff. And for clients, it makes it like that cost is surprisingly dropping. So, I mean, those are the like that's kind of the behind the scenes stuff that, like, you know, maybe I shouldn't be sharing that here, but like in truth, developing new websites that you know, you should maybe be spending more time on like fancy deep integrations and awesome front end customer experience, but a website rebuild should cost you less. If you
blows the mind, doesn't
again,
it?
it makes sense, but like this is the point of this this innovation, right? It allows you to do things faster, and it allows you to have, you know, you break out the developer skill sets, so that's not an obstacle either.
Yeah, and you've touched on a few points there that I think lead on to. I mean, you've kind of started to cover some of my next question for you, which is around. How do you think about the governance? So obviously, to your point, Tom, there's so many tech tools out there. It's probably the $1 million question, but do you have sort of a checklist of things that you should be trying to do as a team to ensure some governance, or as a leader to instill in your team to ensure some governance around bringing in that new tech?
Yeah, I think there's some really good key indicators, you know, just off the top, that maybe you need to look at something in particular. And then there's sort of the bullet list of what you should do. Key indicator in my mind, we now live in a world of digital natives, right? If I'm going to go and staff up a marketing team somewhere, my expectation is they've all lived with the internet for most of their career, or in some cases, most of their lives, right? They should know how to easily work with tools. If you have tools, though, where you're having to go and, like we said, go through this lengthy dev cycle, it's fragile, you have to keep rewriting APIs, you have to, keep it on an old version of some code because if you touch it, it'll break and you have to redo it all again. You know that you've got a big problem. But once you're in a run state and you feel like you're by and large using modern tools, it still, in my mind, makes sense to go through an annual evaluation of what you've got, how it's serving the needs, right? From various perspectives. And like this doesn't have to be like a super lengthy process, right? But I would, you could do it at the beginning of the fiscal year, the midpoint, because the beginning's too busy, or whenever suits your organization, right? But I would define a clear criteria. And this is something your CIO should be all over, right? They should be able to say, listen, we want tools that don't continually get more expensive year over year. We want tools that change and adapt with us. Whatever that criteria is for your organization, define that. Then, there's nothing wrong with asking vendors to try and win you over. That's what we're here for, right? Any vendor in their right mind is going to bend over backwards to try and get you to compare what you're using today versus theirs. It doesn't cost anything. And candidly, you can get the vendor to do a lot of that work for you. I know my team would be happy to do that. You definitely want to engage your stakeholders, and have them part of this process, because what we're really talking about is change management. And if you don't bring people along for that journey, I know, Sam, your team is amazing at this, right? You have to bring people along with any sort of a change. But, include those stakeholders, and then, absolutely fundamentally make sure you're looking at the data privacy, the security elements, and what it costs for you to keep this bit of tooling running for you year over year. Does that make sense, Sam? Would you add anything?
I think what I wouldn't add, but I would emphasize the piece as you evaluate that tech to understand what the risk reward is on each of those pieces, right? So, we talk to folks who, maybe have like legacy, like homegrown types of solutions, databases. We're not here to tell you to change all of it, right? It's about what's working, right? If something is working well and there's not a lot of risk to running it, you have the right folks to support it. You're not relying on just one person's like institutional knowledge, and if they win the lottery and go away, then you're stuck. If you don't have risks like that, there's no reason that you necessarily need to shift. But I think again, it's not just about, okay, here we have these pieces and they check the boxes. You have to take that look from your organization of, is this working for us?
So I have a counter question. Sorry, Lorna. You can go ahead.
You go. No, I was just going to say, I think again, you lead into another good point, and another question that I wanted to raise is, it's not just about assessing the tech and seeing what you think looks right. It's about recognizing how you're then actually going to utilize the tech and make sure that your team is suitably upskilled in using it. So there's two questions that I have in mind, and one is around that utilization and one is around upskilling. And I think it actually would be interesting to tackle the two at the same time, because I think what you're saying, and to your point earlier, Tom, around the change management piece, is there's a huge amount of change management involved. And I think that perhaps isn't considered or discussed internally a lot of the time. We kind of keep our blinkers on and look at the tech that we need, but we don't then think about how that's then going to roll out across the organization. So Tom, I don't know, do you want to start maybe by sharing your thoughts on that utilization piece?
Yeah, something Sam said made me think about this too. One of the really interesting things about what's going on in this space, right, marketing technology, is it's changing super rapidly, right? So we saw over the last year, maybe less, maybe more, every platform out there is adding in some sort of AI capability, right? It's the big hot topic. But that is these platforms extending their capability, doing their capability a little bit better than what they were doing the year before. And depending on who you're with, like if you're on a SaaS platform, you get these updates right away. If you're on something that manages and operates a little bit differently, maybe you have to do some work to do it. But I was going to throw a question over to Sam around, do you think it's important to look at these platforms and assess the overlap that they have between when you implemented it and where you are at any given point in time? Because there's so much, convergence.
I would say you should be aware of the overlap. What I wouldn't say though is I wouldn't say if there's overlap, there's a problem, right?
No.
Because there's a bigger picture than that. So you could be running, two different email systems, right? So like we do this at Exenium because we've got some different needs in terms of the nature of the campaigns that we run. Technically, that's overlap. It makes sense, but what we also have though is you need to have clarity on like who's the end user of that, what's the reason. I've worked with organizations that organizationally have at least two data reporting dashboard tools. I've worked with orgs that have multiple dams. And when I started kind of going down this marketing, digital strategist role like 10, 15 years ago, I look at this and go, why do they have multiple? That makes no sense. Sometimes it does make sense, right? So like, I'm not here to say that all overlap should go away, but that's a good example of like the conversations of exploring what each business unit is using the tool for, and can you consolidate? It's a question and a conversation. It's not something to force, right? So like when you think about orgs that, are growing by acquisition, I am not a fan of let's pull the rug out from under a team and make them learn something new that nobody has ever touched before, right? In an ideal scenario, you're giving those teams time. So that change management piece, that the thing, like when it works for two reasons. One, Lorna, like you mentioned, there is that, we're aligning with stakeholders, we're understanding the needs, and we're communicating out. And also that communication is happening repetitively, redundantly, because people need to hear those messages multiple times. I'm a former teacher. That was always true. It is even more true post-pandemic and with TikTok and everything else. Attention spans are this big. But then the other piece that it requires is giving those teams that are going to be hands-on, rolling up their sleeves, doing the work, they need a supportive learning environment, which is going to allow for experimentation, mistakes, and time. In other words, you can't give people a week of training, have them take, one little quiz and say, great, you're trained, done. That is not training. That is not team enablement. That's just checking a required box.
That's funny. This is what's really fun about these conversations because we all bring our own lens to it. When I was asking the question, in my mind, I'm thinking about from the vendor's perspective, like this Squiz is the platform. We added, I think it's like 5 or 6 different capabilities in the last year alone. A lot of our customers don't know that they already have that capability. It's there. They can just turn it on. You don't have to go through and acquire a new platform. You don't have to go through and chop something out. Like you've got it there. In some situations, you're going to find that your vendor is going to give you more value than you have because they have to compete, right? There's space out there and your vendor can work with you. But you brought up some really interesting perspective too. Just, around the cost of bringing new elements into your ecosystem. That's, is not to be ignored.
Yeah. Well, and like to go to the, the solution partner perspective on the, because I'm trying to just kind of impart, hey, here's what I think of as a marketer and not, go on to like full on sales mode. Yeah. But the value that I think Exenium, for example, could bring to this is we're helping people to shortcut that process, right? So when you find a partner that, aligns well with your business, that understands your business, they can bring perspective that your internal team may not have, right? Because you know what you know. And so the value, you know, again, when we talk about a lot of these things and I meet with people, that, you know, the initial reaction is usually, well, yeah, we can do that because we know our systems. You absolutely do. What you may not know is some other food for thought of what have others done that works well, right? So like a partner who's worked with in a lot of different verticals, or who has, you know, who's worked with your competitors, for example, might be able to bring some perspective that, again, that time to value saves you the time and the churn internally, or even just validates, you know, from that third party perspective, validates the things that you're assuming or that you're thinking.
And I think
I love that.
Again, it's a really interesting perspective on bringing in new tech. I think one of the other things that people might be challenged by that are joining us today, and again, thinking about the Frankenstack, they're looking at this wealth of tech, is we've already made big investments. We're already tied into subscriptions. We've got these solutions that we want to be able to use. We know that they're underutilized. How do you kind of, and again, it all kind of ties back into the communication piece that you're talking about, Sam, but how do you get people on board with actually just making the most of the existing tech that you've got, as well as getting excited about the new and shiny platforms that you're bringing in?
I think it's about good discovery and asking the right questions. So, you know, I like to start with understanding the why. So like when we see that adoption's a problem, or folks feel like they're not getting their value of what they invested in any system, it tends, I keep like putting well, it's one or the other. So it could be that the platform is great, but maybe the way it was initially architected no longer aligns with the way you work day to day. You know, Extendium has had like rescue projects where someone's like, oh my goodness, this vendor implemented, it's terrible. Wasn't the vendor, wasn't the platform. It might have been the way something was customized, right? And things are different now. It could also be that maybe there wasn't, you know, the right kind of training. Sometimes people get trained in the here's what you do, here's what buttons you push, but they miss the bigger context. And so sometimes people have software that they didn't know could perform another function, right? Because they just, you know, again, we know what we know our lane. And so the exciting piece has been, I would say, over the last, you know, 5 or so years, is how interconnected marketing and IT teams have had to become. And when those teams are collaborating, really cool stuff results. And that's actually one of the things that I've liked the most here, is that my tech colleagues also know how to speak marketer, right? Mm-hmm. So they can take that need and say, okay, how is it that you are going to use this? Show me what you're doing now. Show me where the pain points are. And you know, when you get that collaboration, you can overcome a lot. So we would take a look at the whys, right, of how a system was working before we said, oh no, you need new. Might be a matter of tweaking and re-architecting something, or even just retraining.
I think as well, it's something. Sorry, you go, Tom. Go.
You go. Sorry, bit of a delay.
No, it's fine. No, you go. You're fine. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I was gonna throw a little bit of praise towards Sam and Extendium, and sort of step outside of my role here a little bit. One of the things that I've seen your company and other companies like yours do very well is be advocates for the end company, the consumer company of all this, customer, with the ability to, you know, sort of sniff out what's a fair approach to get things done. Often, you know, I can see people be very concerned when they're talking to vendors, right, the platform vendors, because, you know, they don't know what they don't know. But an organization like yours is really good about saying, no, that's a really high price you're paying for that function. Maybe you should evaluate something like this. Yeah. Or, no, those terms sound pretty interesting. Maybe you should push back a little bit. Like, I'm not,
yes,
you know, I'm not saying everyone does this, but like, it is really helpful to have a third body in those conversations who can help you find a pathway around these things.
Yeah, and and similarly, I know that we've liked working with you and the Squiz team for similar reasons, right? When the platform partner and the implementation partner, are on that same page and advocating for a solution that's going to work for the customer, it works for everybody. And I know that, like, I look at it and go, okay, like Exenium views this as like, if you have a partner come in and build your solution, that your team is not empowered to take on and own internally if that's what you want to do. If that doesn't happen, something is wrong, right? Now, of course, there are customers who say, we don't want to own that. We would rather, source that out to a company like Exenium. That's great. But there should always be that transparency and that capability, if a company so chooses, to be able to support that as much as they possibly can. And so that's something that I think is a particular strong suit for us, and it dovetails very nicely with the Squiz offering as well, with that whole model.
There's a lot of love here. Love it. And I was gonna the thing that I was gonna come back to with your point previously, Sam, was around the way that marketing and IT teams collaborate. And it did, and the importance of that, but also how that's happening more and more. But it was making me think about how we kind of talk about how we like to support the vision holder. So the marketers who really want to do the things that will allow their organization to produce the digital experiences that people expect today. Again, to your point around TikTok, like digital experience can't be something that you start 1 month and end 6 months later, because by the time you've done that, everything's moved on and everything's completely different, and you won't be meeting expectations. And so we're really passionate that we allow the vision holder to make those visions a reality, and they're not getting stuck in a dev backlog. And similarly, IT teams aren't laden with marketing jobs that they need to be doing when they've got this wealth of other stuff that they need to be working on. So right. I just think it's a really nice point to kind of close this part of the conversation on, to say, if your marketing and IT teams can work together seamlessly like that, then you're probably looking like you've got the right tech, because you're empowering people to be doing the jobs that they want to be doing and that they're really good at. So yeah, I really love that point. I was just looking, you will have seen I was looking away a minute ago because I was trying to see what questions we've had. We've had one more sort of, and just a shout out to anyone who is watching. Please do drop any other questions that you have into the chat. Now we are going to go into the Q&A section for a couple of minutes. We've had one that's probably more of a statement than a question, really, but I just wanted to throw it out to you guys just to see if you have any comments on it. So it is, since I talk to a dozen brands weekly, the biggest challenge is no one really has a handle of what their Frankenstack actually costs them. It goes beyond licenses. So
yeah,
I can see you both nodding. So you definitely looks like you're in agreement. Yeah. But is there anything that you'd say to support that?
Yes, but Tom, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
You go first, Sam.
All right. So this is like, I would say the majority of the client conversations and prospect conversations we are having right now. It is, okay, what the heck do we do first? But it always starts with, what do you have? And so the Exenium actually has we can do an assessment, and we do kind of 2 levels. One is kind of high level. Let's take a look at what you have, look at a total cost of ownership of, what your options might be, right? What's your TCO right now? And that includes things like, what does it cost you to support this internally? What does it cost you to host it? What is it maybe costing you risk-wise if something is, hitting end of life and you've got to make a decision at some point anyway? And that helps us do a couple of things, right? It uncovers some of those unknowns. It will pull in additional stakeholders sometimes, right? So if you're talking to one stakeholder who says, well, I think we have some of this other stuff, but I don't know, it brings the right people to the table. But then it helps prioritize, what are the things that are most important to invest in? And what we're seeing more often than not is the savings that we can see in that business case for a TCO are sometimes helping to fund adding something new, because if you save over here, then maybe you're allowed to reinvest that in something else, and that's helping get those things through the CFO's office, which just about everything has to go through now. We're seeing that, across the board.
I'm going to also step outside of my role here and give some practical advice from what I've seen in my career. Often, so total cost of ownership calculation, absolutely foundational, the place to start. What I would caution people about is anytime someone wants you to calculate a productivity factor, oh, your people are going to be able to accomplish their tasks 30 minutes less a week, multiply that by 100 people, this is worth this much money to you. Those sorts of fuzzy math things never pan out. That's a sales tool. Don't buy into that. I would look at hard costs. I would say, okay, if I'm actually going to cut a staff member and save a cost because I don't need this, fine, you can add that in. Otherwise, you should be looking for ways where someone is going to address everything it takes to serve your audience. And your audience should, anytime you make a change, your audience should get better service out of that. And so as a marketer, your audience is, all those people who don't know you or who do know you, and, advancing their opinions and your breadth of reach without there, that should all get measurably better. And it shouldn't be too hard to calculate what marketing and your whole, sales and marketing costs you in a year. Make them do some of the legwork. If you don't have a vendor you can trust to do that calculation, bring in someone agnostic. I can see one on the screen right now who can compare things for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been another fast and furious session, that's for sure. I did warn you guys as we joined that it would be the fastest 40 minutes of your life. And we've got a couple of minutes to spare, and I just wanted to say, I know that you've covered as much as you can physically cover in a very quick session, but I know that you both wanted to throw out a couple of offers as well to our attendees today in follow-up to the session. So Sam, I'll throw to you first to hear what you are willing to offer everyone today.
Sure. I mentioned it a little bit here. So, I think a good place to start is with, just some quick consulting to start to take a look at what are you running, what are you thinking about. So I would love to offer, to anybody on this call, we can schedule an hour with myself and, a senior architect to just pick our brains and maybe start to, plot out what might be a good next step for you. If you're looking to, untangle that Frankenstack, or if you're just curious about, you're considering making a move or considering, new platform, we can spend an hour or two with you, and I can bring in a tech person who, can answer those types of questions as well.
Awesome, thank you, Sam. And Tom?
I love that offer. I'm gonna put a big one out there. I'll lean in with you guys. I'll prove it. So if you want to consider what Squiz can do to help, I'll put my team behind it. We'll set you up with a sandbox environment, and you can see and take the tires, and we can talk about how we could actually run a test for you to see what it is. But I think transparency is the thing that I'm all about. If you've got questions, if you want to see how it compares, if you want to see all the numbers, that's what we're all about here.
Amazing. That takes us to the 40-minute mark. So thank you so much, Tom and Sam. It's been incredible. I've loved chatting to you both, and hopefully our attendees have got something from it. If you have any questions in follow-up to the session, please feel free to just continue to comment on the session itself, or I'm sure Tom and Sam will be open to any direct messages that they get through LinkedIn as well. So feel free to hit them up. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks all.